Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products. Welcome to Dairy News and Views from ISU, a podcast where we bring you timely topics to help your dairy thrive. So whether you're on the farm today, in the barn, or on the road, we're glad you're tuning in. I'm Jennifer Bentley, Dairy Field Specialist in Northeast Iowa with Iowa State University Extension. And along with me today, I have my colleague Fred Hall, Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, as today we're talking about genetics with our guest. So welcome back to the podcast, Fred.
Well, thank you. I am sitting here looking at about 3 inches of snow, so I appreciate being able to be inside today.
Yep, 'tis the season, right? So it's
Yep.
mid-November and I guess it's upon us, whether you like it or not. So yeah, we're going to be talking with Dr. Isaac Hagen from the University of Minnesota today. He recently was on our ISU Dairy Heifer webinar series, so we'll include that in our show notes here today. But talking about how genetic tools can improve calf health and performance. So we want to welcome Isaac Hagen to our podcast. He's an assistant professor of dairy production at the University of Minnesota, and he holds a joint extension and research appointment. His applied research program focuses on utilizing genetics to improve the health and efficiency of dairy cattle. So welcome to our podcast, Isaac.
Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you on. And, you're a former four-state dairy nutrition and management conference partner as well. So we know you from that world too. And we brought you on for the Dairy Heifer webinar series, talking about how we can utilize genetics to improve calf health and performance. And so wanted to just bring you back on here for a discussion about that here today. And just want to get your perspective on your thoughts on how you see the role of genetics playing in calf health as compared to maybe some of our management decisions that we make on the farm.
Excellent. Yeah, I think we have a lot of opportunities in these areas and can gain a lot of insight from progress that we've seen in traits from the cow side.
So as we look at that, we have been able to utilize genetics in the dairy cow world for a very long time, but it seems like in the recent years, we're kind of focusing on calf genetics. So how can this help producers use this information to make better decisions with their calf management?
Yeah, I think just in general, we've seen a lot more focus in the last decade, in particular, just on health across the dairy production system, from calves all the way through cows. Obviously, like I said, a lot of that so far is focused on cows. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because cows are the ones that are actually bringing in the money, bringing in the revenue. So we tend to focus on them a lot. But as we think about where we can start making other progress on the dairy from a genetic side, I think that one of the areas that we have a lot of opportunities is on the calf and heifer side. We haven't really focused a lot on that area in terms of genetics. I think there's a couple reasons for that, right? One of those being that a large part of our genetic system is driven by DHI testing. Well, that focuses on cows. So it makes sense that a lot of the data that we've received historically has been on the cow side, and therefore we've done a lot of our genetic evaluations on that side. But when we consider expenses for farms, not revenue, we see that young stock are one of the top expenses on dairy farms, normally the second or third highest expense on dairy farms. So it makes a lot of sense that we're moving in that direction as we have more data sources, new types of data sources. Maybe we can make some progress on the calf side that we've seen on the cow side.
So you had mentioned, the health, you know, so that would obviously include calf survival. But what
Mhm.
about feed efficiency at that period from birth to 400 pounds? Is that going to be significant for us?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I think the first thing that we focused on kind of in calf health, calf traits has been health traits. That was kind of led by Zoetis releasing their calf wellness traits. The Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding is releasing traits related to calf health here shortly. But obviously, the biggest expense actually when raising heifers is still feed costs. So we care a lot about feed efficiency, and that's been an area that we're just kind of starting to get research in and start to find out some of the results and some of the underlying genetics. In terms of kind of when is that measured, I think right now a lot of that focus has been on that early life birth to weaning stage. One of the reasons being is that a lot of those animals are already and especially in the research setting, are either housed individually or are in group housing where we can monitor the allotment of milk that they're consuming. And then if we can get some allotment of grain, we can get some growth and efficiencies kind of we can collect the data in an economically efficient way, which is an important consideration when we think about traits as well. So I think we focused a lot on that time period. Now, I think one of the things that we're starting to look at then is how does that relate to feed efficient? So I should just state that there is limited data on that. A lot of that data has come out so far in abstracts, actually, at scientific meetings. So it hasn't even necessarily been published in somewhere like the Journal of Dairy Science. So we're still in early stages of that feed efficiency work. And we're working on that actually here at the University of Minnesota as well. But one of the things that we're looking at concurrently, and that we will be looking at concurrently, is kind of that relationship between feed efficiency during that pre-weaning period and then feed efficiency at a later stage of the heifer rearing process. Let's say 6 months of age or even slightly older, because we know that's actually when they're consuming the most feed. So that's probably going to have the biggest impact, but it's harder to measure intake during that period. So hopefully we'll see a correlation between those early measures and those later measures.
So there are actually two tracks with that research. Obviously, beef on dairy is a huge item, between $2 and $3 per hundredweight for a lot of dairymen. And then our heifers, which we are trying to identify which cows to have heifers from, and am I right? Are there two tracks for those?
Yeah, when we think about genetics, we can kind of consider the beef on dairy, right? Those are crosses. We know from research in the crossbred breeding sphere that improvement in one breed leads to improvement in the crosses. So if we are making improvement in our dairy breeds for these traits, we should also be making improvement in our beef on dairy crosses. I think that's a really important avenue that we need to communicate, that progress in one leads to progress in the other. There isn't a lot of information really on the genetics of beef on dairy animals, or even when we start thinking of what do we expect from this quote unquote breed group of animals. And some of that is because we don't necessarily have good measures of how we would expect native beef to perform in a dairy system, essentially. So it's really hard to get measures of, for instance, heterosis and hybrid vigor, which we utilize a lot in the breeding world to understand how do the crosses of two purebred lines perform relative to those purebred lines.
So Isaac, I just wanted to go back quickly to the health trait side of things and just help me understand, are health traits highly heritable or are they low heritability?
So we would generally consider those low heritability. Most estimates for health traits are below 10%. So a heritability is essentially just saying how much of the phenotypic variation of a trait is due to genetics. So when I say that the heritability of a health trait is less than 10%, what I'm saying is that less than 10% of the variation that someone would see across all animals is due to genetics. So that sounds like a small number, right? Less than 10%. You're saying, well, that means that environment and management are 90% or greater of what's driving health and disease resistance traits. And while that's true, what's important to note is that 5 to 10% is not a insignificant number either. That is something that can and then that can appreciate. And I say that because genetics is one of these great things that changes that we make today are permanent and they add upon each other. So progress that we make today is added to progress that we made yesterday and is added to progress that we make tomorrow. And so that long-term change is what really is important in genetics. And we've seen that long-term change in our cow kind of fitness traits, where we can see that changes that we've made to lower heritability traits make a difference in reversing negative trends or making progress.
So help our listeners understand that when you say progress we've made, what are we talking about on their farm? Reducing
Yeah,
treatment cost, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, so we can look at things such as some longevity traits. So when we see some progress in traits such as cow livability, the ability of a cow to remain alive on a farm versus die, we can see that that's a fairly low heritability. I mean, that is a low heritability trait. And we can see that we can kind of plot out what percent, or excuse me, what is the change due to genetics and what is the change due to management. And we can see that we have been able to maintain or make improvements in those traits by including those in our selection goals. The same can be said for traits such as DPR. Now we've kind of met this kind of steady state, I want to say, for DPR. But from the genetic progress side, we're kind of steady right now. But prior to utilizing DPR in our selection goals, we were actually losing ground in that area on our farms. And so, from a combination of genetics and improved management, we've seen huge gains in recent years.
For the folks listening who don't know what DPR is, can you explain that?
Yeah, so DPR is daughter pregnancy rate. So that's kind of the overall, I want to say, measure or benchmark a lot of times that herds are utilizing to measure reproductive performance. So it's just a measure of how many cows get pregnant within a typical breeding cycle of 21 days.
So, Isaac, as we take a look at kind of the forward thinking and looking into what research is coming down the pike, do you and others at University of Minnesota, are you doing some research on this genetic improvement for calf health, or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so right now we're focused more on the feed and growth efficiency side of things. So I have a grad student right now, Isaac Root, who is working on his master's in this area. And we're just finishing up collecting data for that project right now. So we have pre-weaning, intake, and growth on calves, and we've been able to follow a group of those calves through 6 months of age. So we'll have some really cool results from that, I think, coming this spring. And then there are other researchers that are looking at this as well. There's a group out of Guelph that has been researching some feed efficiency traits as well, and they've had some really cool abstracts at meetings recently, particularly showing that as that calf transitions from at birth kind of to weaning, we know that calf goes through some digestive changes where essentially they're a monogastric when they're born and then kind of slowly develop their rumen function and become they become essentially become a ruminant during that period of time. And we know that there are changes in the genetics across that time. So looking at feed efficiency at birth isn't necessarily the same as looking at feed efficiency when they're weaned, because those animals are very different animals. And so I think that will play a role in kind of how we define these traits and when we define these traits for the ages that we're looking at. So we're interested in that. And then I think moving into the future, we actually will be going into a little bit of the beef on dairy side of things as well, just to try to understand from a breed perspective, what do we expect from these animals? And so that's kind of coming in the future in the next year or two. That will be heading down those directions.
So the work you're doing, you would suppose will significantly affect the genomic testing that many herds are doing on their calves. Uh, you see changes in what that battery is going to look like.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think right, our goal is right now to kind of start defining these traits and hopefully show that there's value in these traits. And once we can do that, then the conversation turns to how do we collect these traits on a large scale, such that they potentially can be incorporated into our national genetic evaluations, so that producers could get a result back for these traits, whether that be through their genomic tests or it's just selecting sires for their herd that match their selection goals. But the kind of the first that we're kind of still in early stages of that, where we have to kind of understand define what the trait would be that we're looking at and demonstrate it has value from a genetic perspective.
Yeah, so I think that's some pretty cool research that's coming down the pike in calf management. I think one area that we may not have considered 20 years ago, right? Talking about how we can improve calf health through genetics, but I think tying in that component with how we manage our calves now, it's just amazing how far we've come with improved calf health.
Yeah, and that's I think, even as we manage things, as we move towards more group housing and auto feeders and things like that, that really creates opportunities for collecting more data and more data from more calves. And so that's a really exciting phase, but we have to figure out how to use that data as well, because that's not always the data that we've historically worked with.
Yeah, so more tools in the toolbox, right? So,
Yeah.
so if you had some advice to give to producers right now, I know we're in the early stages of all of this. What would you say that we can tell them right now?
Yeah, so I think right. I always, from a genetic perspective, we always say use an index, and by that I just mean you're using a combination of traits that kind of gives you an economic value, a genetic value based on economics, right? And there are a lot of those types of traits. Net merits from Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding's one, dairy wellness profits one from Zoetis, different, different industry entities provide those, different breed entities provide those. So I think it just depends on kind of if, um, so net merit, we have shown here at the U improves economic efficiency for the dairy. But if calf health at today is one of your primary things that you're really concerned about calf health, you want to make sure that it's incorporated into your selection goals. Maybe you're using dairy wellness profit. If you are genomic testing, because that is through Zoetis, so it is a product that they provide through genomic testing. That being said, like I said, the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding has recently kind of announced that they have plans. No necessarily firm date on when those will be released, but they have plans to release their own calf health evaluations, and those would be available on a national scale to everybody. And so, as we get those traits and as they're incorporated into net merit or some other index, I think that's the key thing, is because when you're selecting based off of net merit, you're selecting those traits, or dairy wildness profit, you're selecting those traits based off of their economic importance to the farm, right? We don't want to select for calf health traits and ignore production. We don't want to ignore reproduction. And so we want to balance all those things together.
So it's really putting it into one package is what I'm
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
hearing. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Well, that sounds great. Fred, do you have any closing questions?
No, I think I appreciate Isaac's point that this is a work in progress, that, as we get more information, it may affect the genomic tests that are being done or the management we're doing. And I think it's one of these situations where producers need to stay tuned. There'll be more shortly.
Yeah, and I want to just state, kind of where we're at in terms of where we have opportunities. I really do think it's on the young stock side from a genetic selection standpoint. So I think that is where we're going to see new traits coming down the pipeline.
So Isaac, as we conclude here, where can our audience stay connected with, your projects that you're working on in regards to genetics and calf performance?
Yeah, so we try to get this information out. We have University of Minnesota has Dairy Star articles that we publish monthly, so you'll often see some of the things that we're working on in those from both my group and then others that I collaborate here at the University of Minnesota. These results also, I want to state that I'm collaborating with researchers here at the University of Minnesota on a lot of our growth and feed efficiency things, Brad Hines and Isaac Sulfur. So always, you could also tune into the Moose Room and other things like that from Brad to hear kind of as we get results. Think we'll definitely be talking about those through that outlet. And hopefully we just get to, be on podcasts like yours as well to continue to share updates as they come available.
Great. Well, thanks for being on today. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in to Dairy News and Views from ISU. And until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep making a difference in the dairy industry. Thanks, everybody.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.